Elena Park keeps her hands braced against the stainless steel tray so they don't shake. The red folder sits between her and Dominic Russo, close enough that she can see the faint crease along its spine. Two of his men block the exit to the secured surgical wing at St. Vincent's Medical Center, jackets unbuttoned, hands resting near their belts. The fluorescent lights hum. Somewhere behind her, a heart monitor pulses in a steady rhythm. Dominic stands 5 feet away, tailored coat still on despite the heat of the corridor. He doesn't look at the guards. He doesn't look at the nurses frozen at the far desk. He looks only at her. "Open it," she says. Her voice lands flat against the tile and stainless steel. No tremor. No plea. One of his captains shifts his weight. The leather of his holster creaks. Dominic lifts a hand without turning. The movement is small, practiced. The captain stills. The smell of antiseptic mixes with gun oil. Dominic's eyes drop to the folder, but he doesn't reach for it. He studies her instead, like he's measuring how much she knows and whether knowledge is enough to keep her breathing. Behind the glass doors at the end of the wing, 3 more men wait. Elena recognizes Matteo Gallo among them. Dark suit, silver tie, phone pressed to his ear. He doesn't hide that he's watching. The corridor feels narrower than it did 10 minutes ago. "Say it," Dominic says quietly. Elena doesn't break eye contact. "You killed the wrong man." The words hang between them. No one inhales. A nurse's shoe squeaks against linoleum. One of the guards glances toward the sound, then back at Dominic, waiting. Dominic's jaw tightens. Just once. He steps forward. Close enough now that she can see the faint scar along his collarbone where she stitched him last winter. He doesn't acknowledge it. He doesn't acknowledge the nights he came in bleeding and left without giving a name. "You're very sure," he says. She nods toward the folder. "You can read." The captain nearest the door mutters something under his breath. Matteo lowers his phone, eyes sharpening. Elena feels the weight of their expectation. This is the part where Dominic usually makes an example. Quick. Clean. No hesitation. He looks at her hands on the tray. The dried line of blood along her wrist hasn't been washed off yet. Not his blood. Someone else's. "You knew," he says. She doesn't answer. The silence stretches. It becomes its own pressure. Dominic doesn't fill it. He lets it expand until even the nurses stop pretending to move. He reaches for the folder at last. The room seems to lean toward him as he opens it. Paper shifts. A clipped stack of photocopied ledgers. Bank transfers. Shipping manifests stamped with red hook addresses. A notarized statement on top. He reads the first line. The air changes. Matteo pushes through the glass doors without waiting for permission. His shoes strike the floor in sharp, controlled steps. "Dominic," he says, not looking at Elena. "We need a decision." His gaze flicks to the open folder. He takes in the paper. The hesitation. "The cruising queens are waiting," Matteo continues. "You don't answer now, they'll answer for you." Elena keeps her eyes on Dominic. "You burn the clinics," she says, her voice steady, "and you still won't erase what's in there." A muscle moves in Dominic's cheek. He doesn't look at Matteo. He doesn't look at the guards. He reads another page. The captain by the door steps closer to Elena. Not touching. Just enough that she feels the heat of him at her shoulder. Dominic closes the folder halfway, thumb still inside to hold his place. He turns to Matteo. "Call them off," he says. Matteo's expression doesn't change. "That's not what they're asking." Dominic's voice lowers. "I didn't ask what they're asking." The captain near Elena's shoulder shifts again, waiting for the correction. Waiting for the real order. Dominic looks back at her. "Who else has seen this?" he asks. Elena lets a second pass before answering. "Enough." The word lands harder than anything else she's said. Matteo's phone vibrates in his hand. He doesn't check it. His eyes stay on Dominic. Through the glass doors, one of the men outside nods toward the street below. Sirens flicker faintly against the far windows of the wing, blue light smearing across tile. Dominic opens the folder again. He reads the signature at the bottom of the notarized statement. His father's name appears on the next page. And for the first time since he walked into St. Vincent's, he forgets to hide what crosses his face. The elevator doors close between Dominic Russo and the surgical wing, sealing in the sterile air and leaving only the faint trace of smoke that followed him from Queens. Matteo Gallo stands beside him in the mirrored steel, adjusting his silver tie as the car descends. Neither speaks. The hum of cables overhead fills the silence. Dominic watches their reflections instead of Matteo. Two men in tailored coats. One of them already measuring where power shifts. His phone lights again. A photo this time. He doesn't need to open it to know what it shows. He does anyway. Bensonhurst. Back room of Russo's social club. The long oak table. 8 chairs filled. A 9th left empty at the head. Matteo's eyes flick to the screen. He doesn't pretend not to see it. They're just talking, Matteo says. Dominic locks the phone and slips it back into his pocket. The elevator stops. The doors part. Outside, the night air hits hard, thick with exhaust and the distant bite of smoke drifting down the West Side Highway. His car idles at the curb. The driver steps out, already opening the rear door. Dominic doesn't get in. He looks south, toward Brooklyn. Matteo studies him. "They're in your father's chair," he says quietly. Dominic's jaw tightens. He walks past the car instead. Matteo follows. Pier 7 by sunrise, Matteo continues, keeping pace. "That's what they said. If she's alive when the sun hits the water, they'll handle it themselves." Dominic stops mid-stride. Traffic moves around them. Impatient. A horn blares. He turns slowly toward Matteo. "You told them to say that." Matteo doesn't blink. They didn't need help. A black SUV pulls up behind Dominic's car. Two men step out, faces set. One of them avoids Dominic's eyes. The hesitation from the hospital has followed them outside. Dominic looks at each of them in turn. No words. Just a measured stare. One lowers his gaze first. Matteo exhales softly through his nose. "Queens wasn't random," he says. "Neither was Newark. They're choosing assets that touch her name." Dominic's gaze shifts back to the river. "They think she's leverage," Matteo adds. "They think I'm," Dominic says, then stops. The word hangs there. Matteo waits for him to finish it. Dominic doesn't. He pulls his phone out again, scrolling. The photo of Bensonhurst. The empty chair at the head of the table. He zooms in. Someone has placed a glass there. Poured halfway. Waiting. The message isn't subtle. A car speeds past, wind cutting through Dominic's coat. For a second, the city noise swallows everything else. He imagines the men in that back room, the smell of espresso and cigar smoke, the hum of the refrigerator behind the bar. He can almost hear the scrape of chairs on tile as they lean forward, voices low. Without him. Matteo steps closer, lowering his voice. "You go there now. You look like you're defending her." Dominic turns his head just enough to meet Matteo's eyes. "And if I don't?" Matteo's mouth curves faintly. "Then you look like you're defending yourself." The choice narrows. Dominic steps toward his car at last. The driver straightens. "Bensonhurst," Dominic says. Matteo doesn't move immediately. "If you walk into that room without a body," he says, "they'll demand one." Dominic pauses with his hand on the door. Behind them, another SUV pulls up. More men. Faces he recognizes. Faces that used to wait for instructions without question. They don't ask where he's going. They wait. Dominic looks back toward St. Vincent's one final time, as if the hospital's glow might offer something steady. It doesn't. He gets into the car. As the door shuts, Matteo leans down to the window. "Sunrise," he says. Dominic meets his gaze through the glass. "Then they'll have to watch me," he replies. The SUV pulls into traffic, heading toward Bensonhurst. On Dominic's phone, another message arrives. A single line. Dominic's thumb stays pressed against the page where his father's name appears. The fluorescent light above him flickers once, then steadies. Matteo's reflection wavers faintly in the glass cabinet behind the surgical carts. His phone vibrates in Matteo's hand again. Matteo answers without stepping away. "Yeah." A pause. His eyes shift to Dominic. "Which one?" he asks into the receiver. He listens. His jaw sets. "Elmhaven," he says, and lowers the phone. Elena doesn't blink. "Which clinic?" Dominic asks. "Queens Boulevard," Matteo replies. Front windows are gone. Someone tossed accelerant through the door before the fire trucks got there. Elena's shoulders tighten, almost imperceptibly. The dried blood on her wrist has darkened to brown. Dominic closes the folder, not gently. The sound cracks through the corridor. Call them off, he says again. Matteo doesn't move. They think you're negotiating, Matteo says. They think that file bought her time. Elena's gaze stays on Dominic. She doesn't ask which clinic. She already knows the one on Queens Boulevard sees undocumented families after midnight. She knows who might be inside. Dominic steps away from the tray. His coat brushes the edge of a supply cart. A stack of sterile gauze shifts and falls, the soft thud too loud in the quiet. You don't control them? He asks Matteo. Matteo holds his stare. They're controlling themselves. A siren passes outside St. Vincent's. The red and blue reflection slides across the corridor walls, across Elena's face, across the red folder. Dominic's phone vibrates now. He looks at the screen. Newark. He answers. Static. Then a voice he recognizes, strained. Warehouse on Wilson Avenue. Second alarm. We're pulling men out. Dominic's knuckles whiten around the phone. Who authorized that? He asks. Silence on the other end. He doesn't wait for an answer. He ends the call. 2 fronts. Queens and Newark. He looks at Elena. Did you send it anywhere else? He asks. She studies him, measuring. You think I'd keep it in one place? She says. Matteo takes a step closer to Dominic, lowering his voice. You're losing Red Hook next, he says. The import office. They're saying if the boss won't act, they will. Elena hears it. Red Hook. The same name stamped across the manifests inside the folder. Dominic's breathing changes. Slower. Controlled. He turns to the guards at the door. Get my car. The captain near Elena doesn't move. His eyes flick to Matteo. The hesitation is small. It lands heavy. Dominic notices. The captain straightens and steps out. Matteo watches him go, then looks back at Dominic. They're meeting in Bensonhurst, he says. Already started. Dominic's gaze sharpens. Without me. Matteo doesn't answer. Elena lets her hand slip off the tray. Her palm leaves a faint print in the condensation. You burn the clinics, she says quietly, and you prove them right. Matteo turns on her. You don't get to speak. Dominic doesn't look at Matteo when he says, she speaks. The word settles the room for half a breath. Then Matteo's phone rings again. He doesn't silence it this time. He answers on speaker. Voices spill out. Overlapping. Heated. Someone shouting about Queens. Another about Newark. A third voice cutting through. Sunrise, it says. If she's breathing when the sun hits Pier 7, we're done waiting. The line goes dead. Pier 7. Elena's eyes flick to Dominic. He doesn't look at her. He's already moving, crossing the corridor toward the exit. His coat flares behind him. Matteo falls into step, close enough that their shoulders nearly touch. At the glass doors, Dominic stops. He turns back once, toward the surgical wing. Who else? He asks Elena again. This time her answer comes without pause. Enough to matter. Outside, the sirens grow louder. Smoke from Queens carries faintly even this far south, a bitter thread beneath the sterile air. Dominic pushes through the doors. As they close behind him, Elena catches the reflection of blue light flashing across the red folder still lying on the tray. And she knows the next fire won't be in Queens. The message glows against the dark interior of the SUV as it speeds toward the Verrazano exit. Street lights strobe across Dominic Russo's face, slicing it into shadow and gold. He doesn't respond. Matteo's car follows close behind. In the rearview mirror, twin headlights hold steady. No distance. No drift. Dominic scrolls back to the photo from Bensonhurst. The empty chair. The half-filled glass waiting at the head of the table inside Russo's social club. He zooms in again. His father's portrait hangs on the wall behind that chair. Thick frame, dark eyes, the same jawline. The car hits a pothole. The phone shifts in his hand. For a second, he sees another room layered over the glass reflection. Fluorescent lights, stainless steel, Elena Park standing 5 feet away from him at St. Vincent's. "You killed the wrong man." Her voice cuts through the hum of the engine. He remembers the first time he heard it. Emergency room. Last winter. Snow melting in dirty slush outside the hospital entrance. Blood soaking through his shirt near the collarbone. She stitched him without asking questions. No tremor. No curiosity. When he gave the name Russo, she paused for half a heartbeat. Then kept sewing. He noticed. He always notices. The SUV merges onto the Belt Parkway. The river to the right is black, barely reflecting the sky. His phone vibrates again. This time it's a photo. Red Hook. The seafood import office on Van Brunt Street. Smoke curling from the loading dock door. He inhales once. Slow. "Pull over," he tells the driver. The SUV eases to the shoulder beneath an overpass. Concrete pillars loom above them, dripping condensation. Dominic steps out into the cold. The air smells faintly of salt and exhaust. Matteo's car pulls in behind him. Matteo gets out, closing his door softly. "They're forcing your hand," Matteo says. Dominic doesn't look at him. He sees Elena again in the surgical wing. The way she held his gaze. The way she said she recognized his name. He turns to Matteo at last. "She knew," he says. Matteo's expression doesn't shift. "And she stayed." The space between those two words settles heavy. Another message arrives. "Pier 7. Before sunrise. Or we decide for you." Dominic looks toward the dark outline of Brooklyn ahead. For the first time the thought lands clear and sharp. She didn't run from him. She walked toward him. Dominic Russo keeps his eyes on the black water beyond the guardrail, but the words on his phone keep flashing behind his eyelids. Pier 7. Before sunrise. The overpass rumbles as a truck passes overhead, vibration traveling down the concrete pillar and into his boots. Matteo Gallo waits by the SUV with his hands in his coat pockets, breath faint in the cold, watching Dominic like a man watching a fuse burn. Dominic opens the red folder again. The paper smells faintly of copier toner and smoke. A stapled packet sits on top. Grainy photos, timestamps, a scanned affidavit with a notary stamp from Yonkers. Beneath that, shipping logs, Red Hook addresses, container numbers that mean nothing until they don't. His thumb catches on a photograph. Staten Island. A warehouse with corrugated metal siding, sodium lights turning the night the color of old bruises. The image is dated 15 years ago, time stamped down to the minute. Dominic stares at it until the edge of the photo bites into his skin. His breath slows. The memory doesn't arrive like a story. It arrives like a smell. Bleach. Plastic sheeting. Diesel from an idling van. A man on his knees in a pool of harsh light, wrists zip-tied, face bruised enough to hide whether the eyes are pleading or furious. Dominic hears his own voice in the memory, flat and young, repeating a question he already believes he knows the answer to. The man answers anyway. Not with begging. With details. Container routes. Port schedules. Names of girls on paper, listed like cargo. "A warning about Dominic's brother," said once, fast, like someone trying to throw a match before the room floods. Dominic's hand tightens around the photo. In the present, the paper in the folder shifts as wind slips under the overpass and tugs at the pages. Matteo says nothing. The silence sits there, heavy and patient. Dominic flips to the affidavit again. Elena Park's name appears in a line he didn't see before, typed cleanly as if it can't cut anyone. He turns the page. There's a copy of a report marked disposed in block letters. The signature at the bottom is his father's. Dominic's throat tightens. His jaw flexes once, hard enough that his teeth click. The phone vibrates in his pocket. Another photo arrives. Red Hook. Van Brunt Street. The import office loading dock, now fully engulfed, flame crawling up the brick like it owns it. Dominic doesn't move for a long beat. Then he slides the red folder shut, slow and deliberate, like he's closing a door he won't be able to open again. Matteo steps forward. "Pier 7, he says. Dominic looks up, eyes still on the smoke-lit photo. "And Elena?" Matteo asks. Soft. Dominic's voice comes out even. "Not touched." Matteo's mouth tightens. The overpass shakes again as another truck passes overhead, and Dominic turns toward the SUV, Because the only thing waiting at Pier 7 is a room full of men who believe blood fixes betrayal, and he's walking in with proof that the betrayal might have been his. The SUV rolls off the Belt Parkway and cuts toward the Brooklyn waterfront, tires hissing on wet pavement. Dominic Russo keeps the red folder on his lap, palm flat over it as if paper can stop bullets. Ahead, the cranes and floodlights of Pier 7 rise out of the dark like scaffolding for an execution. Cars are already there. Black sedans lined along the curb, engines running, headlights off. Men stand in loose clusters near the chain-link fence, collars up against the wind off the East River. Cigarette tips flare and vanish. A few faces turn as Dominic's SUV approaches. Quick glances, then eyes away, like he isn't the sun they orbit anymore. The driver stops short of the gate. Dominic opens the door before anyone can touch the handle from outside. Cold air knifes in. It carries salt, diesel, and the faint stink of smoke that seems to follow him through the city. Matteo Gallo pulls up behind, stepping out as if he owns the ground. His silver tie catches the light. He scans the pier the way a man scans a room for exits. Dominic walks past him. The boards underfoot are slick. Water slaps against pilings below. A tugboat horn groans somewhere upriver, slow and indifferent. The captains are gathered beneath the floodlights near a cargo container painted white, the paint blistered from years of sun and salt. The container door is open just enough to show a table inside. A chair at the head faces outward. Empty. Dominic sees the half-filled glass on the table. Dark liquid trembling with each gust of wind. Matteo steps to Dominic's shoulder, close enough that his breath hits Dominic's cheek. "They want it clean," he murmurs. Dominic doesn't answer. A captain named Raffi De Luca moves first, peeling away from the group. He doesn't smile. His hands stay visible at his sides, empty and deliberate. "Boss," Raffi says, voice flat. He doesn't step aside to make space. Dominic stops within arm's reach. The floodlight above them hums, insects spitting against the glass. Raffi's eyes flick to the red folder. "You brought paperwork," he says. A ripple moves through the men behind him. Not laughter. Not surprise. Something tighter. Dominic lifts the folder slightly. "You brought gasoline." Raffi's jaw muscles jump once. Behind Dominic, Matteo's phone vibrates. He checks it, then slips it back into his pocket without a word. His gaze stays fixed on the line of captains as if counting how many will follow him, and how many won't. Dominic takes one step toward the open container. Two men shift to block the entrance. He stops. The wood creaks under his boots. The river keeps hitting the pilings, steady as a pulse. Raffi holds Dominic's stare. "Before sunrise," he says softly, "we need to see what you're made of." The empty chair waits, the half-glass trembling. Dominic doesn't sit. He opens the red folder right there, in the wind, and the top page lifts, revealing his father's signature again as a captain's hand drifts toward his waistband. The page snaps in the wind, tugging against Dominic Russo's fingers as if it wants to tear itself free. His father's signature sits in the lower corner, clean ink, confident stroke, while Raffi De Luca's hand hovers at his waistband, not quite gripping, not quite letting go. The floodlight hums above them. The river keeps knocking against the pilings below. No one speaks. Dominic lowers the page just enough to look over it. Across the open mouth of the cargo container, the empty chair waits like an invitation and a threat. The half-filled glass trembles on the table, small ripples running across the surface with each gust. Matteo Gallo stands half a step behind Dominic's shoulder, eyes scanning the line of captains. His posture stays loose, but the tendons in his neck stand out. Raffi's gaze doesn't move. "You brought your father's name out here," he says, voice low. "That's bold." Dominic flips to the next sheet and holds it up without stepping forward. The paper catches the wind again, edges fluttering like a white flag that refuses to be won. Shipping manifests. Red hook addresses. Container numbers. A date stamped in black. A captain farther back leans in, squinting. Another spits over the side of the pier and wipes his mouth with his sleeve. Raffi's mouth tightens. Paper can say anything. Dominic's eyes don't leave Raffi. Fire says one thing. A short laugh comes from the group. Sharp, not warm. Then it dies. Dominic turns the page again. A photocopied report marked disposed. The stamp is thick enough to feel through the paper. Beneath it, A second signature. Matteo's gaze flickers to it. His jaw tightens. Rafi's hand finally closes around something at his waistband, but he doesn't draw. He waits. Dominic lowers the folder slightly, enough for the men closest to see. Not enough to give anyone the chance to snatch. The silence stretches until it becomes unbearable. A tugboat horn groans upriver, long and low. Wind pushes cold through Dominic's coat sleeves. His fingers go numb around the edges of the folder. Rafi shifts his feet on the slick boards. "You want us to read?" he asks. "Or you want us to watch you choose?" Dominic doesn't answer. He steps toward the container. Two men move to block again, boots scraping wood. Their shoulders form a wall. Dominic stops an inch from them, close enough to smell cigarettes and aftershave. He holds the folder out. "Take it," he says. No one reaches. The hesitation spreads down the line like a crack in glass. Matteo inhales sharply behind him. One sound, small, swallowed fast. Rafi's eyes flick past Dominic, toward Matteo, then back. His hand comes out of his waistband. Not empty. A pistol appears, lifted slow. But the barrel doesn't turn toward Dominic. It turns toward Matteo Gallo. Rafi De Luca's arm stays extended, rigid under the floodlight, the shape in his hand turning the air around it brittle. The men near the container don't rush. They don't breathe loud. Their eyes pinball between Rafi, Matteo Gallo, and Dominic Russo's face. Matteo doesn't lift his hands. He doesn't step back. He stands the way he always stands, balanced, ready to move first, as if the pier belongs to him. Dominic's fingers stay on the red folder. The pages inside flutter once in the wind, then settle. The river knocks against the pilings, steady, indifferent. Dominic shifts one step, not toward Rafi, not toward Matteo, toward the empty chair. Wood creaks under his boot. A few heads turn with it, tracking the sound like it's a signal. Dominic sets the folder on the table inside the open container, directly in front of the half-filled glass. He doesn't sit. He doesn't touch the drink. He places the folder flat and keeps his palm on it, claiming it without hiding it. Rafi's eyes narrow. "You brought this here to split us." Dominic lifts his hand from the folder and lets it hover for a beat, empty and visible. "I brought it here because you're already split," he says. The words don't rise. They don't soften either. A captain behind Rafi makes a small sound in his throat, caught, then swallowed. Another shifts his stance, heel scraping wet wood. Matteo's gaze flickers to the folder, then to Dominic, the way a man looks at a door that just locked from the outside. Dominic reaches into his coat and pulls out his phone. He holds it up without turning the screen toward himself. The display shows the Red Hook fire, the smoke curling over Van Brunt Street, the timestamp stamped clean in the corner. He turns the phone so the captains can see. "You keep proving loyalty with ashes," Dominic says. "You want proof from me? Watch what I do with my own name." Matteo's jaw tightens, a tendon jumping once. Dominic slides the folder across the table with two fingers, slow enough that no one can mistake it for a trick. "Matteo," he says, voice even. "Step aside." Matteo doesn't move. Dominic doesn't repeat himself. He looks past Matteo to the captains gathered at Pier 7, letting the wind carry the pause. "I'm calling it," Dominic says finally. No one moves on Elena Park. Not tonight. Not ever. The pier goes quiet in a way that feels wrong, like the city itself is holding its breath. Rafi's eyes sharpen. "And if we don't listen?" Dominic's gaze doesn't drop. "Then you're not defying me," he says. "You're replacing me." Matteo's head turns a fraction, just enough for Dominic to catch the look in his eyes. And in that look, Dominic sees the next consequence arrive before it's spoken. The wind keeps pushing off the river, cold and wet, but it doesn't move the line of men at Pier 7. Rafi De Luca's arm lowers a fraction, not away, not surrendered, just enough to turn the moment from a single point into a slow spread. Boots shift on slick boards. A captain coughs once and doesn't cover his mouth. Matteo Gallo's eyes stay on Dominic Russo like he's waiting for Dominic to blink first. Dominic doesn't. He leaves his hand off the red folder, letting it sit alone on the table as if it's too heavy to claim. The half-filled glass trembles beside it. A phone buzzes somewhere in the cluster of coats and cigarette smoke. Then another. A third. The sounds come in quick succession, like raindrops finding a roof. Mateo's pocket vibrates. He doesn't reach for it. Rafi does. He glances at his screen, and the skin around his eyes tightens. He turns the phone outward for the men nearest him. A photo. Red Hook. Van Brunt Street. A row of unmarked sedans parked crooked near the seafood import office. Plain cars with government plates, men in dark jackets stepping through puddles, flashlights cutting through smoke-stained brick. No insignias. No sirens. Just presence. The pier feels narrower again. Dominic looks at the image without moving his head. The folder stays on the table like bait. Mateo finally speaks, voice low. You see what you've done. Dominic's gaze shifts to him. I see what you've been doing. The words land. They don't explode. They sink. Rafi's phone buzzes again. A text this time. He reads it, then lifts his eyes to Dominic. Bensonhurst is splitting, Rafi says. 2 cars left the club already. Not yours. A captain behind him mutters a curse, quick and sharp. Dominic watches the ripple travel through the men. Small movements, shared glances, the instinct to choose a side before a side is chosen for them. Nobody steps forward. Nobody steps back. The space holds, stretched tight. Mateo's jaw works once. He turns his head slightly, scanning faces. Dominic doesn't need to follow his gaze to know what Mateo is counting. Another message arrives on Dominic's phone. A number he doesn't recognize. A single photo fills the screen. St. Vincent's Medical Center. The emergency entrance. 2 men in plain clothes standing near the sliding doors, heads angled toward the lobby, hands near their belts, but not the way Dominic's men stand. The timestamp is now. Dominic's fingers tighten around the phone until the edges bite. He lifts his eyes to the dark skyline beyond the pier, then back to the captains. The river keeps hitting the pilings, steady as ever. Dominic's voice comes out even. Get me to St. Vincent's. Mateo's mouth twitches. Almost a smile, almost nothing. Or what? Mateo asks softly. Dominic doesn't answer. He steps away from the table, leaving the red folder behind under the floodlight, unprotected, undeniable. While every set of eyes at Pier 7 decides, in real time, whether Elena Park lives long enough for him to reach her. The red folder sits where Dominic Russo left it, open on the table inside the cargo container at Pier 7, pages pinned by the edge of the half-filled glass. The floodlight turns the paper the color of bone. Wind worries at the corners, trying to lift them. Men keep their distance from it. Rafi De Luca doesn't follow Dominic when Dominic turns away. He stays near the table, eyes moving across the faces in the dark. Some of the captains look at the folder like it's poison. Some look at it like it's an opportunity. Mateo Gallo watches Dominic's back without calling him back, his posture still neat, still composed, like composure can hold a line together. Dominic walks past the idling sedans. Doors open without words. No one reaches for him. No one touches him. The space around him feels different. Less like reverence, more like calculation. The SUV door closes. The city swallows the pier behind glass. St. Vincent's Medical Center glows ahead, bright against the night, as if it has no idea who stands at its doors or why. The emergency entrance slides open and shut, swallowing stretchers, spitting out families, never stopping long enough to notice the weight passing through. Dominic enters without his men crowding him. The absence behind his shoulders is louder than footsteps. In the secured surgical wing, Elena Park stands exactly where he last saw her, near the stainless steel tray. Her hands are bare now. The line of dried blood is gone from her wrist, replaced by clean skin and a faint red mark where she scrubbed too hard. She looks at his coat first. Then his face. No one speaks. A nurse at the far desk lifts her eyes, then drops them back to the screen, fingers moving faster. The heart monitor behind the wall keeps its steady pulse, indifferent. Dominic reaches into his coat and pulls out the red folder. Another copy, thinner, corners bent from being carried. He doesn't offer it across the distance. He sets it on the stainless tray instead. The metal rings softly. A small, clean sound. Elena's gaze drops to the folder. The top page shows a signature she doesn't touch. Dominic's hand stays on the edge of the tray for a beat, Knuckles pale against steel. Then he lets go. Elena doesn't step closer. Dominic doesn't step back. Outside the glass doors, somewhere far below in Lower Manhattan, sirens rise and fade, like the city breathing through clenched teeth. The fluorescent light above them hums. The folder waits between them, and neither of them reaches for it.